Good morning and welcome to the Morning Spotlight Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cam, coming to you as always from the Spotlight Studios here in Morristown, New Jersey. We're getting a little bit off our normal posting schedule. This episode would normally post on Tuesdays when we do our real estate episode, but it's posting today, Sunday, June 20th, which many of you may know is Father's Day, which may or may not give away who my guest is today. He's spent almost 40 years in the title insurance industry. 40 years? That's a long time. He's the grandfather, basically, of the Morning Spotlight. If the Morning Spotlight is my baby, he is Gary Ham, my dad. Dad, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Michael. Great to be here.
It's so great to have you on.
Hey, Mike, before we get started,
Yeah.
a couple things.
Okay.
One, you always introduce yourself as the coolest guy in title insurance.
Right.
Did you talk to Mom before you tagged yourself with that? Because she thinks I'm the coolest guy in title insurance.
If we can get Mom in here, she may say otherwise, but I mean,
Not available.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, if you got me into title insurance, so thank you, I guess. And I really took the mantle. Somebody's got to take that torch. You can't carry the torch forever. The torch must burn on. And here I am, hopefully carrying that torch for hams in the title insurance industry moving forward.
I get it. But if you're going to use a superlative, coolest, why don't you say the cool guy in title insurance? The coolest guy is right here. Yeah.
We'll find out about that. So
the other is this. What episode is this?
This is going to wind up being close to 90, I think, or actually it's going to be 84.
84.
Yeah.
So this is the 84th episode.
This will be the 84th episode that we post of this show.
So it took you 84 episodes to get the old man on the show.
Well, it just coincided so well. It's Father's Day.
Okay.
I mean,
well, I'm glad to be here, Michael.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you here, and we can get started here, I guess. So
no, we already got started. Let's go.
Yeah, well, we're started. We're rolling right now. But so tell me, obviously, I know a lot about you. I've known you for almost 31 years now. So let's go back. Let's learn more about Gary Ham, the child, because obviously I didn't know you back then. So you were born in Newark, right? Newark, Beth?
I was born in Newark. First 5 years of my life, I lived in East Orange. And then we moved up to Pompton Plains, New Jersey.
Right.
Around 1960, 61. I was born in 1956.
Gotcha. So what was
hospital in Newark?
Which hospital in Newark?
Beth Israel.
Beth Israel Hospital in Newark. Amazing.
It's still there.
Yep, it is. It is. So tell me, what was childhood growing? What things, shenanigans were you getting yourself into as a kid growing up in Pompton Plains?
Okay. See, you asked me before, are there any questions that are off limits? Well, any incriminating questions would be off limits, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay. So shenanigans, okay. Shenanigans, not much. All right. Let's just say that growing up in Pompton Plains was a suburban environment, maybe a blue collar town, I would think.
Yeah.
A lot of sports. Sports was basically what we grew up on. Sports, riding bikes, and going up into the mountains and fishing and stuff like that. So yeah, that was a pretty much day-to-day agenda for me.
Right. Yeah. And then, I mean, I grew up in Pequannock or Pompton Plains, Pequannock area my whole life. So, I mean, obviously I know what that was all about and, good town to grow up in and baseball and everything. So, so you went to Holy Spirit School, right? And then Newman Prep for high school?
No, well, I started at kindergarten. I went to North Boulevard School, public school.
Okay.
And then for grammar school, I started at Holy Spirit, the Roman Catholic school, for 2 years.
Right.
And then Our Lady of Good Counsel was another Roman Catholic church that opened up in Pompton Plains within the same town as Holy Spirit.
Right.
So anybody that lived in the jurisdiction of Our Lady of Good Counsel that lived in Pompton Plains was transferred from Holy Spirit to Our Lady of Good Counsel. So that was third grade. So the way it worked was Our Lady of Good Counsel started with first, second, and third grade. I was in third grade, so I was always, and it moved up every year.
Right.
So I was always in the highest grade of Our Lady of Good Counsel. Graduated there, and then went to Newman Prep.
Gotcha. And then from there, you went to Scranton. So you have Just as a curiosity type thing. So like you went to, Catholic, private school growing up. Newman Prep as a Jesuit, what was a Jesuit school, right? Or was it
No,
no,
that was Roman Catholic.
Roman Catholic.
Roman
And then
Catholic.
Scranton's a Jesuit school.
The Jesuits.
Yeah. So what was that experience like going to those types of schools? I mean, I'm sure you had nuns and priests and stuff like that as teachers. Kind of like what was the vibe like that? Vibe, growing up in that environment. Obviously, probably discipline was a primary thing, right?
Well, yeah, discipline was pretty key in grammar school with the nuns. We had Franciscan nuns in Our Lady of Good Counsel. So I think out of all the teachers at Our Lady of Good Counsel, maybe there was only 3 or 4 lay teachers. The rest were nuns. Okay, and that was co-ed. So other than the fact that you were being taught by nuns and they were more strict than your public school, and you would get smacked on your knuckles from time to time for shenanigans.
Those are the shenanigans for sure. And obviously, you never got smacked on knuckles because you did not engage in any shenanigans. Duh.
No, I got smacked on the knuckles, and I got smacked in other parts of my body with bigger boards than a ruler by the nuns. Okay?
Yeah.
But here's the deal: when you went home and told your parents that you got hit by, sister so and so, they wouldn't complain. They would say, "Well, I guess you deserved it."
Right.
Turn the page.
Right.
And then when I went to Newman Prep, that was a little bit of not a culture shock, but a different environment because it was all boys.
Right.
Okay. It was all boys, and there weren't any nuns, except for Sister Joan was the vice principal, but she wasn't a teacher. And they had a few priests that were teachers, and they were pretty strict disciplinarians. So it was different, going from a co-ed environment through 8th grade and then all boys school. So the shenanigans kind of increased with the all boys school.
Right. Well, yeah, a little bit less discipline, more just more stuff to kind of get yourself involved with.
Correct.
Yeah.
Then University of Scranton at the time had just turned co-ed. I think maybe 3 or 4 years prior to my starting there, my freshman year.
Yeah.
Had been prior to that at some point all boys, and prior to that I think a seminary. So getting there, when I got there, they, in your class, I forget how many kids were in our class, but we had very few young ladies in the class.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit more about the, kind of the path from going from, Pequannock, Pompton Plains, growing up in that area, going through those schools. Then you get to Scranton. Did Grandma and Grandpa, your parents, go to college, or were you the first one to go to college?
I was the first one to go to college.
Right. And was that something that they were just like, you have to go to college? I mean, no doubt about it.
Well, yeah, but I think, you're talking, in the early 70s, and, that's pretty much every parent had that same outlook.
Right.
Going to college.
Yeah.
There was no question about it. No matter whether you had gone to public school or Catholic school, you were going to college.
Yeah. Just because they wanted you to have, I mean, I guess maybe like a better life or set up for better opportunities down the road.
Well, that was, the goal, and even obviously for every parent is to, hope that your kid reaches a higher level of education or a station in life than you have.
Right.
So yeah, college was obviously everybody's goal. But don't forget, back in that time period, I think the tuition for room and board at the University of Scranton was either $3,000 or $3,500. All included.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a nice vacation.
I guess it's all relative, but
right. Yeah. Yeah. So, how did you pick University of Scranton? Because obviously there was a lot of schools in New Jersey to go to. Did you want to get a little bit further away from home, but still be within, close distance? Was there a reason why you picked Scranton?
Well, there was a career center at Newman Prep run by a priest, and pretty much all the schools that came in to recruit were Catholic schools or the military schools. So I think when I applied to colleges, it was the University of Scranton, which was Jesuit. Notre Dame was Catholic, right? Seton Hall was Catholic. Providence was Catholic, and Villanova was Catholic. So these are all Catholic schools that I applied to. I don't think I applied to a non-Catholic school.
Gotcha.
For whatever reason. I mean, that was because they were the folks that were recruiting within the school.
Right. Yeah. Which I think makes sense for sure. All right. So you land on Scranton. Tell me because I've been to Scranton a couple times in my life. I mean, I watched a Scranton Wilkes-Barre Yankees game there once. We played in a regional when I was coaching in Scranton. But I mean, people may only really know Scranton from The Office, stuff like that. So what was the experience in Scranton like? I'll let you take your sip of your coffee first. I should have kept talking. That's a bad host move out of me.
Well, here's the deal. I think The Office is not too far off in terms of its portrayal of the people of Scranton. People of Scranton are fantastic.
Yeah,
they are salt of the earth. And I had a great time at Scranton. The only problem with Scranton is that it's a former coal mining town, and it's fairly dreary.
Right.
There are still coal mines up there that are abandoned or shuttered, but it rains a lot in Scranton. So you're not going to get a lot of sun, and there's not a lot to do except for the local pubs or whatever. But I met a lot of great guys and gals from there.
Right.
I have, as friends that I made at the University of Scranton that we still get together multiple times a year. And
yep.
I graduated in 1978, and we're still going strong. So.
Right. And that's I think, I mean, I have the same type of thing as from TCNJ. I mean, I have guys that I'm still super tight with. We're really good friends, and like you said, we see each other multiple times a year. And that's sometimes tough because you wind up going from Pompton Plains, New Jersey, to the University of Scranton, which is maybe like an hour away, right? An hour away.
About an hour and a half.
Hour and a half. Yeah. So you get there, and all of a sudden you just find this little group of people that now that just kind of helps shape you, I think. And it's good to have friends like that because, they're like you said, super tight, 1978 to 2021. And you guys are still, in contact, talking, all that kind of stuff, which is fantastic.
Right. It is good.
Yeah. So you were a business major, right, at Scranton?
Okay, Mike. See, I told you, untouchable subject. I started as an accounting major.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I never knew that until just now.
Oh, really?
Really?
So I was an accounting major. And I was not a very good accounting major.
All right.
And I was playing baseball at the time. And I think it was my sophomore year. I think the course was cost accounting. And it was an extremely difficult course. And you know how baseball works. I mean, when the schedule begins, you're on the road, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a week.
Yep.
Traveling around. Okay. In buses, and there's not a lot of time for study. Forget weekends, because weekends you're
playing.
You can't study on the weekend.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, so I was not doing very well in cost accounting. And it was getting to the end of the year, and I didn't think I was going to pass the course. So I asked for a meeting with the professor, and I said, Professor, here's the deal. I know that I probably I'm not going to pass this course, but here's the reason why. I missed a lot of classes because of traveling for baseball. And I just haven't put the time in to study because I just haven't had the time.
Right.
If you give me a D as in dog, okay, I will transfer out of accounting into business.
Right.
He says, deal. So I went from an accounting major to a business major on a deal made with the accounting professor.
Right, for a D in an accounting class.
I got a D. And here's the beautiful thing. So that was my sophomore year. I got a D in accounting, cost accounting. But I think I graduated with like a 3.7.
Wow.
So, even with that grade pulling me down, my GPA down, I was still able to rebound and do fairly well in business.
Right. And you mentioned you were also playing baseball because that was a significant part of your life too growing up. right? And then obviously mine down the road. But for you, it was, something also significant. So you played at Newman Prep, you played your first couple of years, right, at Scranton.
Right.
And was that, did you meet like some of the guys that you have as friends now, were those teammates of yours, or were they just more just schoolmates of yours?
One of the guys that is still my bud, from Scranton, I went to grammar school with, I went to high school with, and I went to college with. And we played ball through grammar school and high school. He didn't play in college.
Gotcha.
But other than that, the Scranton buddies that I have did not play.
Gotcha. Right. So then,
well, I just restate that. Paul, my best man, who who lived in Wayne and went to University of Scranton. He went to DePaul High School. He played baseball.
Right. So at some point in this path of life, like you stopped playing baseball, right? I think it was after your sophomore year of college. Right. And then when did the bodybuilding start? Because a lot of people there's a lot of people that listen to this show that had no idea when I show them like the one picture that I have of you as a bodybuilder, they're like, holy, that's your dad? That's Big Gar? I'm like, yeah, that's Big Gar. Back when Big Gar was yoked up.
Well, here's the deal. You got to say, here's the deal.
You got to say, that's going to be the title of this episode. Here's the deal with Gary Ham.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, basically weightlifting was just starting to come into vogue in terms of sports enhancement and stuff like that. And this is before your time, but before free weights, everybody had what they call the universal gym. It was a gym with all these different stations on it. So we had one at Newman Prep. I got into that in high school, and then I convinced Grandma and Grandpa to buy me a set of weights from the basement, and I started lifting weights in the basement early on in high school. When I got to college, then I had this huge, weightlifting facility.
Yeah.
And I just continued. The problem with it was that weightlifting and baseball shouldn't coexist.
Right.
Because as you lift more weights, you get tighter. You can't throw the baseball as well. You can't swing as well. You lose your flexibility. So I basically weightlifted my way out of baseball. By my sophomore year.
Yeah.
I could have kept playing, but I actually had more enjoyment lifting weights. And early on, when I was lifting weights, I wasn't, bodybuilding.
Right.
I was just lifting weights to lift weights, and because I liked the camaraderie with the guys and going to the gym every day. And that continued after I graduated. Then, worked, as you know, up in IBM, and continued there, and law school, whatever.
Yeah. Right. We're definitely gonna get there. I just want to,
But yeah.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to know kind of like when that fascination almost started. So it was kind of in high school, basically, and then
it might have even started like 8th grade or so around there.
Yeah.
I bet you if we went back to Grandma and Grandpa's house in the basement, those weights are still there.
Yeah.
They were plastic-coated weights filled with cement.
Yeah. Was this, now I just don't know. I'm just trying to put it into context. So, 8th grade, early high school, was that like Schwarzenegger time? Was that when he was starting to get really big, or was that before that?
That was before Schwarzenegger.
Right.
Okay. When it was, Schwarzenegger had maybe just come to America around that time.
Yeah.
Right.
But hadn't become the guy.
In the early 70s, he started to,
right,
be the man. And that's what caught, not just my attention, but everybody's.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was a cultural phenomenon, basically. Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
The movie and the book.
Right. So we after college, you start working at IBM in Binghamton.
Actually, Endicott, New York.
Endicott, New York. That's like right next to Binghamton, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Northwest of Binghamton. That was IBM's first manufacturing facility up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So right after I graduated from college, I got into IBM. And it's a funny story how I got that.
Yeah.
Did I ever tell you that story?
You just answered the phone, right?
Yeah.
There was like a phone down the hall because obviously there was no cell phones back then. There was a payphone, right?
It was a payphone. So they had a winter formal, which is like a winter prom, senior year. I think it was in February. And I didn't have a date, so I didn't go to the winter formal. And it was either on a Thursday night or a Friday night, I forget. So that morning, the next morning after the winter formal, the payphone down the hall I lived in an off-campus house, but it was owned by the University of Scranton. And the payphone was on the landing on the second floor. My bedroom was right near the landing on the second floor.
Yeah.
The phone, it's like 8 o'clock in the morning, and the phone is ringing and ringing and ringing, and it's not stopping. Okay. So finally, I get up and I said, hello, and the woman on the other end said, this is Mrs. So-and-so from Career Placement. Is Tommy so-and-so there? I go, no, Mrs. whatever, Tommy's not here. I think he went to the winter formal last night and he's not home.
Yeah.
She says, oh, okay, because we have IBM on campus today for interviews, and I just had 3 people cancel. And we can't have that because IBM will never come back. So what's your major? I said, business. She said, do you have a suit? And I says, yes. And she said, can you make it down here in a half hour? I said, I'll be there. So lucky for me, that prior to my senior year that summer, Grandpa, my father, had taken me to Macy's to buy me an interview suit. And he said, listen, you need a blue wool blend pinstripe suit. Light pinstripe, not heavy pinstripe.
Right. You don't look like a gangster, like a 20s gangster.
We go to Macy's and he picks out a Hickey Freeman. Hickey Freeman at the time, and it's still a good suit. I mean, that suit back then, this is 1977, I believe.
Yeah.
Cost like $500 back.
Wow.
$500. Tuition, room, and board was $3,500. So that suit today was probably like a $3,000 suit. Right?
Yeah.
So I get that suit and I put it on. This is my first interview. And I put the Hickey Freeman on. I got the black tie shoes, white shirt, solid tie. I'm looking like an IBM young executive.
Right.
Walk down to campus. I get there, in what's called the green room, waiting to go in with get interviewed. And I look around and I see my competition. I get one guy there. He's got like a sport shirt, and jeans. The other guy's got a sport jacket and chinos. I'm like,
no chance.
Don't stand a chance. Okay. I walk in with that suit. Next thing you know, a week later, I get a letter from IBM inviting me up for another interview. Okay. The problem was when I get there up at IBM for my first round of interviews.
Yep.
The first manager I meet, he's looking at my resume. I still have I put that blue suit back on because that's the only one I had.
Of course, yeah.
And so he's going through my resume and he said, I like you. He said, but let me ask you a question. How did you get this interview? I go, well, IBM invited me. I had an on-campus interview. I guess I did well. And I got a letter from human resources at IBM to come up for this interview. He goes, yeah. He said, but I mean, you got like a 3.7 GPA. He said, we don't hire anybody less than a 4.0. And like, you could, the pin in the balloon, the air was gone. I'm like, oh, man, I just wasted time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He goes, but you never know. So long story short, I think there was 4 of us that got interviews at IBM. They actually hired 3 of us.
Wow.
The other 3 were 4.0 students. I wasn't. But the moral of the story is look good. It makes up for your GPA.
Look good, feel good, interview good, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that personality, like, I mean, anybody that's listening, obviously, where I get my personality, but obviously the personality and the suit puts you over the top, and made up that 0.3 difference. That's really the name of the game.
What are the odds, right? You don't get a date for the winter formal.
Right.
You're in bed, 8 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, Saturday morning. The phone is ringing, the payphone's ringing, and I'm the guy that answers. It could have been somebody else answering the phone.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, after that, I got that interview. That woman from Career Services, she would always call me when guys were coming in for interviews.
Yeah.
See if I want, because she knew I'd be there.
Right.
She knew I would look good in that blue suit.
Yeah, of course. Well, there you go. I mean, you got to put the best face out there for Scranton, and we've talked about it a lot on the show that there's a huge power in just showing up. You show up, you do your thing, and good things happen for sure. So how long were you working at IBM?
I worked at IBM for 3 years.
3 years.
I was in what they call contract procurement. So IBM up in Endicott was a manufacturing plant. There were certain processes that they didn't have the room to do within the structure of IBM. So they would subcontract that manufacturing work out to different plants, manufacturing plants throughout the country. So it was my job to manage those outside manufacturing plants and get the product back to IBM so they could assemble the mainframe computers that they were building.
Right. And IBM, like they were starting to take over the computer world at the time, right?
IBM was the computer world.
Was the computer world.
That was it.
Yeah.
I mean, you got a job at IBM or you worked at IBM. I mean, you were like cream of the crop. I mean, that was.
Well, they only hire people with 4.0s or prospective bodybuilders with nice suits.
But, and it's funny, but the rule was, I mean, you did need to wear a certain suit at IBM.
Yeah.
It had to be a solid color suit. It was either gray, blue, or brown. Okay. You had to wear a white shirt and a solid color tie and tied shoes. Couldn't wear loafers or anything.
Yeah.
I think 3 years after I was there, they started to relax the shoes a little bit, and you could wear loafers, but everything was tight as a drum.
Right.
Which fit me well because I had gone through, parochial school, Catholic school, and I was used to the discipline.
Right.
That was IBM.
Yeah. So 3 years at IBM doing what you were doing. When you decided to go to law school, what was the impetus behind that decision? Were you just looking for a change? You were trying to do something a little bit different? So why law school?
Now, here's the deal. So that's number two, right? So remember,
it's way more. I don't know if you've been counting, but it's way more than two.
I know. No. So early in our conversation this morning, I mentioned Paul, my buddy from Scranton who played baseball.
Yep.
He was also my roommate at the University of Scranton. He was in law school. So one day, he calls me, we're talking, and I'm up in IBM, and he's out in Springfield, Massachusetts, at Western New England College, School of Law. And he goes, I think you would do well in law school. Because you should come to law school. So why would I go to law school? I got a good job here at IBM. People would kill to get this job.
Right.
He goes, what the heck? Why don't you come and try it? It's fun. All right. So I quit IBM. And people were like, you're an idiot. You're on a career path at IBM. This is what, back in the 70s. I mean, that's a good gig.
Yeah.
Right? So 3 years, I left IBM on good terms and went to law school. And in my summers, my first 2 years in law school, I did go back to IBM and work in manufacturing plant for them. So, I still had connections at IBM. But I had no regrets about leaving, and obviously the path my life took after me.
Right. I mean, the path led you here to sitting with me, your son's show.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, when you grow up in a metropolitan area like this, the tri-state area,
yeah,
and then you try to relocate to a smaller area like Scranton or Binghamton, you miss some of the cultural events, the social events that you grew up with, and it's fine for a few years, but then you start missing that environment.
Right.
So for me, the change was good, and it worked out. It worked out great.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, very great. So, what do you think the most? This is. I'm gonna lay one up here for you. So, because Mom listens to the show, so I'm gonna lay one up here. What do you think the most significant moment of your law school career was? You better. You better answer it right.
What a softball question, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it wasn't the JD degree or anything else, right? It was not that. That's where I met Mom. So I'm a third-year student. Mom is a first-year student. And I'm in the cafeteria, and I see this pretty young lady come into the cafeteria, and boy, I think I should like to meet her.
Yep.
And so, lucky for me, her locker was on the same row as mine, the first floor of the facility. So one day I got up the nerve, talked to her, and I asked her out on a date, and that was October of 1983, last year of school.
Yep.
First. And we were engaged 3 months later. And then we were married October 84. So within 12 months, we were engaged and married. And I graduated Western New England, took and passed the bar, all in 1984. So it was that stretch there, that 1 year stretch was amazing.
That was a pretty significant year.
One of your dreams that you've been married to now for 37 years, and you graduate the law school, you pass the bar. Life is great.
Life is great. Yeah. What was the first date? What'd you do with mom on the first date?
First date, I took her to an Italian restaurant. Mom being Italian, right?
Sure.
Me, 3/4 Italian. So I took her to an Italian restaurant. We had a fantastic dinner. And that was really the first time that we were able to sit down and talk.
Yeah.
Because, within the halls of law school, you're not really carrying any meaningful conversation.
Sure.
How are you? Weather's nice. So we're sitting down having conversations, and it turns out, lives were pretty parallel, and we had all the same interests, and families were kind of the same. So, I mean, it's one of those things where, it just clicked.
Yeah.
So, from that first date on, it was full speed ahead.
Yeah. So you mentioned, I mean, obviously, like the significant part of the story was this year of your life where you meet mom, you get engaged, you pass the bar, you graduate law school, you pass the bar, and then you guys get married. This like doing the courtship, I guess, for lack of a better word, over the course of a year, with obviously, was that something that was common in those times? Like, was that something that was difficult to explain, maybe to both sets of my grandparents? Like, hey, I just met this person, we're going to get married after knowing him for 3 months.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, on mom's side,
yeah,
what the conversations were there. But I know in my household, they're like, well, what are you talking about? I've known this girl for 3 months, because I had dated girls and had been in relationships for years, going steady with different girls.
Yeah.
Right. And then, to go from, dating, social level, multiple girls, to picking one out and go, this is the one. Especially in that time period where they're like, wait a minute, you got to focus on graduating law school.
Yeah. Studying
for the bar and taking the bar. I mean, what are you doing? You're going to be too distracted or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But you know what? If there's a will, there's a way. And life, has everything planned out for you. And that was just the path that was chosen for me. I mean, it just worked.
Right. Yeah. No. It's a great story. Obviously, I mean, I'm biased, but I think it's a great story, and it obviously worked out. So you said 37 years, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just incredible.
This October.
Right. Yeah. So, so you guys get married. You're living back in New Jersey. Mom finished up at Seton Hall Law School. Just because we'll add that in just so everybody knows that you guys moved back to New Jersey. How did you go from law school to starting to work in title insurance? How do you make that jump?
That's an interesting story. So we're living in Lodi. Mom got us an apartment, a walk up in Lodi, because she was going to Seton Hall Law School. I was working in Wayne for a small law firm in Wayne, doing matrimonial mainly. Matrimonial was not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
So the guy who owned the firm had a little title agency within the firm that he ran too. So I got a taste of title insurance at that law firm. Not that I was ever thinking about that was going to be my career.
Right.
Anyway, so mom's mother, your grandmother, was a secretary at Metropolitan Life in New York City. And I think she was a secretary for like an executive vice president. So she said, well, I can talk to my boss if you're unhappy where you are. Maybe there's something at MetLife. That's it.
Yeah.
So, okay. So she talked to her boss and they said, no, there's nothing here, but we could, have him come in and we'll put him in touch with our general counsel. And maybe our general counsel knows somebody in New Jersey. So I went to the city, MetLife, and met with the guy, general counsel, and he says, well, I do know an attorney that does a lot of litigation work for us, claims work, at McCarter and English. I'll reach out to him, see what he knows, and see if he can put you in touch with someone.
Yeah.
See if maybe McCarter is. So I went to McCarter. They didn't have anything. But the attorney, David Kopp, he says, we don't have anything here, but my brother-in-law is state counsel at Commonwealth, and he just got there from type court title. And I think he's looking for an associate counsel. So I'll set up an interview. So he set up an interview with Roger Blauvelt, who was state counsel at Commonwealth at the time, back in 1985. And had the interview. Roger hired me. And that was the beginning of this title insurance career.
Right. Yeah. Almost 40 years later, right? You said like you had no idea, but at any point, did you like look at, kind of maybe 20 years in, be like, oh my God, I've been in this industry for so long. I mean, obviously you've held a lot of different positions as agency manager, state counsel, your regional counsel now for Fidelity, and just also bias. But I mean, how many people in the state of New Jersey in the title insurance world have the breadth of experience and, like that kind of stuff. So was there ever a point where you were just like, wow, I've really been in this for a long time?
No. I think there are points in anybody's career where you get some growing pains maybe, and you go, well, do I really want to keep doing this for my whole career?
Yeah.
So I'm going to try something else. But then you figure out, then you come to your senses and you say, wait a minute, the living is pretty good. I got a guaranteed paycheck. I don't have to keep hourly logs like they do at law firms. So that's a good deal. There's good benefits, and it's a niche field where there was only a few of us at the time. As state counsels or whatever we were, coming through for different companies, and we all kind of formed a friendship. Larry Feinberg, Nancy Cook, and Larry Usick, all different companies. And we kind of grew up together, in the field for the last 35, 40 years. And because the field is so narrow in terms of its scope,
yeah,
you can become an expert in the field fairly easily because this is all you do every day, 7 days a week.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's, a very interesting way to look at it. And, like I see some similarities, I guess, maybe for me, having Alex and other people that are my age in the, the title world now kind of growing together, especially with clients and all that. So that's definitely a great way to look at it, that you've kind of come through the business with all of these people.
Yeah. There was a concern, a real concern, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that, the old guard was kind of graying out.
Yeah.
And who was going to replace us? But like you said, there's a bunch of young guys and gals that have now come into the business, especially in New Jersey, that I think the title business is in good hands.
Right. Yeah, I would agree, considering I'm one of those young guys.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So another significant moment in your life was August 3rd, 1990. Could you explain what happened then?
August 3rd, did the Yankees play?
Yes.
I guess the Yankees did play. Yeah. August 3rd, 1990, yes. The coolest man in title insurance was born. Little did he know.
Right, I had no idea.
The coolest man in title insurance.
Yeah.
Great day.
Great day.
Great.
Yeah, tell me about it. It's your first child, right? Granted, I turned out amazing. But what was it? Were you scared? Were you nervous? Were you, as a new dad?
I didn't have to do much work, Mike.
Well, that's true.
So
Yeah, mom did all the work.
mom did all the work, and apparently your head was too big for that C-section. Yeah, it was a long night into day in the hospital for your birth, and I mentioned the Yankees because the Yankees were on TV, and when you had gone to Lamaze class, to help your wife breathe and push the baby, and
Yeah.
the game was on, and it's like extra innings, and Bobby Mercer is up, and I think he hit a home run, and I'm watching it, I'm distracted from my Lamaze duties, and the nurse, she was like a Marine, goes, "Will you pay attention over here?
Yeah.
Do your job."
Right. Yeah.
I said, okay. So I went back to my Lamaze duties, but that was fantastic. It was one of the best days of our lives. And the coolest man in title insurance was born.
Right. And then 3 years later, then you have Nicole, my sister. I mean, people know that I have a sister on the show. So, yeah. So that must have been the second best thing that happened.
Well, not second best. Both 1 and 1A, or whatever you want to call it, label it, categorize it. Another great day.
Yeah.
It was just almost like repeat of the first.
You're watching the Yankee game, you're half paying attention.
No, there was no Yankee. It was May 5th. No Yankee game. I don't.
Gotcha.
But a great day.
Yeah.
In hospital, Chilton Memorial Hospital, where Derek Jeter was born.
That's true. Derek Jeter, Mike Hamm, Nicole Hamm. I mean, that hospital has some serious juice flowing out of it for sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. I want to take a quick minute. We're going to go back to that bodybuilding thing because at some point you did a bodybuilding show, right? And that kind of almost ended the bodybuilding career path. And then you got into powerlifting, which you did all the way through into like your 40s, right? That was kind of the trajectory of that.
Well, yeah, I did the bodybuilding thing. It was Mr. New Jersey. I think it was at William Patterson College, the event. And I was in law school. I think I was in my first year of law school with that competition. And I competed naturally, with no steroids or anything. I mean, you just can't compete with guys that are juicing. So I knew, after that competition that it was extremely hard to get in shape, diet wise, lifting wise, or whatever. It consumed your life, basically.
Yeah.
I wasn't getting the enjoyment out of lifting weights on the bodybuilding side. And then I just started lifting weights just as I had done before when I first started, just to lift weights. And then eventually got into the powerlifting. Well, I wasn't in powerlifting that long, but you're right. When I was 40, I was still powerlifting.
Yeah. You won won a state championship, right?
Yeah,
when you were 40 in powerlifting?
Yeah. I won the state AAU powerlifting championship at age 40 in the 242-pound class. Although I didn't weigh 242, but I weighed 228, I think. And the cutoff, it was a 225-pound class, then I went to 242. So I wasn't about to lose 3 pounds that morning.
Yeah.
I competed.
Right. You just compete with the big dogs and then crush them.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was put you over the edge? Like what was the lifts? The Olympic lifts, right? Squats?
No, these are either powerlifting or squat, bench, and deadlift.
Okay.
Yeah, the Olympic is the clean and jerk.
Clean and jerk, right. Gotcha. All right. So, so you do that. Also, over the course of this time, I'm growing up, I'm playing baseball, you're coaching me. And basically you coached me all the way up through into high school. And then we would still play catch and all that kind of stuff, even when I got into college, and turn your hand purple. But what was that experience like? You're working full time and you weren't working from home. I mean, people could see you if they watch this on YouTube, they could see you in your home office right now, but you weren't working from home. You're working in Wayne, you were working in Hackensack, right? Other places. So you would work all day, come home, and then coach baseball. Was that, obviously that had to be difficult, right? But tell me about that experience.
You know what? When I started coaching you and Nick, that replaced the weightlifting, right? So instead of going to the gym at 5 o'clock, or whatever, I was getting on the ball field with you guys. So that was a replacement outlet, for something athletic for me to do.
Right.
And so it replaced weightlifting. It was fun. I mean, it wasn't hard to do, because it was so enjoyable. But the only thing is there's a little more traveling, obviously.
Sure.
Rushing back, you can make sure you're on the field at time because, back when we were doing Little League there in Pequannock, and there were only a few fields and a lot of teams and a lot of kids. So if you missed your allotted time to work for that field, you lost it. Right? So you had to make sure you're there on time. And at the time, I think my office might have been in Island, and then we moved it up to Wayne. But I was doing a lot of travel,
right?
To get to and from work back to the ball field.
Yeah, which was obviously something that maybe at the time I didn't realize like how significant that was for me, but it was. I mean, it's looking back now, that was a significant part of my life, and how I grew up basically, and how I eventually became the coolest guy in title insurance after the OG coolest guy in title insurance, Gary Ham.
So now you know why when I was yelling "bro strikes," it wasn't because I was frustrated with you. It was road rage. I had a carryover from long to you.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Like when you gave me this was a classic. We got to run a lap. It was just we've had a lot of fun times on the baseball field for sure.
Sign language.
Yeah, right. Sign language. All right. So we're getting closer to the end when we're going to wrap this episode up. So because this is a Father's Day episode, and I know that, I just mentioned it, how significant, obviously, a part of my life you are. I mean, the only reason why I'm sitting here doing the stuff that I'm doing is because of, kind of the life that you gave me. And since we're on the subject of fathers, I just want to give you a chance to talk about your father, because I know that he was a significant part of your life. I mean, he passed away when I was 8, and he was a significant part of my life that first 8 years. I mean, hanging out with him, I remember going to the driving range and he can hit a golf ball, and I was like, didn't know what the hell was going on. But I mean, I even talk about this sometimes too, like going to his house on Saturdays and him making like bologna sandwiches. I mean, I still have a soft spot for bologna sandwiches because of, me, you, and him doing those lunches together. So tell me how significant of a part, the significance of him in your life throughout your entire life.
Well, I think it goes without saying, he was my idol. Right? He passed away when he was 66.
Right.
So, you were 8.
Yep.
Of an unexpected heart attack. So, he was, when you looked at my father, your grandfather, back then, I mean, jet black hair, right? Trim, maybe 5'11", about 175 pounds, always working around the house, doing projects or whatever. And then he had that heart attack. It was just a shock, obviously, to us, and
right,
you and me in particular. But because we did spend those Saturdays, every Saturday, Grandpa's house, I'd take you over there,
right,
and he'd make lunch for us, and not just bologna sandwiches, but the hot dogs and eggs.
Yep.
Hot dogs and eggs and ketchup on an Italian roll. And then Sunday mornings, we would go to church together, right, the 3 of us. And so, yeah, I mean, fond memories, great memories. Great guy.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Do you think that, because you ever, I mean, I know when you're growing up as like an angsty kid, you're always just like, oh, I'm going to do things a lot different than my dad did it. But then like, as you get older, you're just like, oh, well, these are all the reasons why he did those things. And maybe I didn't know what the hell was going on when I was a kid because I was a kid. Did you have those experiences, or were you pretty much like, like this is the guy? I mean, he's
no, my father, his first job, I think, was working in a factory in Swiss Scissor factory in New York for a long time, and then he got into selling real estate. He was a realtor for most of the time I was growing up as a kid, young kid, and then he got a job in the township of Wayne as the industrial director. So neither one of those 3 paths are anything that I aspired to. I didn't want to work in a scissor factory.
Right.
I didn't want to be a realtor, and I didn't have any inclination to work in public life as an employee for a municipality. So there was never any, angst or thought that I had to do something different. Don't forget, being the first one that went to college, I mean, I was on a different path anyway.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then once I went to college, I mean, I never went, when I graduated from the University of Scranton, I never came home. I went directly to Endicott, New York.
Yeah.
And then I went directly to Springfield, Massachusetts. So, I never came home, in my early 20s to have any, confrontations or
alpha dog situations. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, I was just curious. Just because, I mean, like that was, I mean, for me so long ago, I mean, for everybody, I mean, it was almost 23, I guess, years ago now, which is kind of crazy to think about it in the grand scheme of things. Cause it feels, even for me as a kid when it happened, like, just like, I mean, I still remember that day, but I just wanted to give like you a chance to talk about it because I know that he was a significant part of your life as he was mine and everybody else's. So I just wanted to chat about that for a little bit before we wrap it up. So yeah, do you have something?
Thank you.
Of course. So we're going to move this, and I don't know what we're going to do for this part, but we're going to move this into our closing segment, which we call Under the Spotlight. So I've had my dad, Gary Ham, the OG coolest guy in title insurance, on the show for we've been talking for almost an hour. I just looked at the clock, which usually this happens. I go through an entire episode. I look at the clock and I'm like, oh my God, we've been talking for way more than I normally do on this show. But if there's one thing that you want the spotlighters, which is what I call my audience, to walk away from this episode with, what would that one thing be?
It's a tough question.
This is a tough question.
You're asking me to give your viewers advice.
Well, I mean, it could be anything. It could be just a tip. It could be yeah.
And I always try to lead my life this way. When something feels right, in your gut, you go with it. And I say that because, it felt right to leave IBM and go to law school. I didn't have any intellectual, thought process that, that all this, I didn't write it down on a piece of paper, pros and cons.
Yeah.
It felt right. I went with my gut. Right? With mom, I met mom, and after dating for a month or so, I said, this is the woman I want to marry.
Yeah.
It just felt right, and I went with it. And then throughout my career, I've been in the business for close to 40 years, but I've worked for various different companies. And, so all those moves took feeling in your gut, that it felt right. And I went with it because my theory is you're betting on yourself, right? If you can't bet on yourself to win, then what are you doing?
Right.
So I always knew that if I had made a wrong move, I could always rebound and right the ship.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the way I've led my career.
No, I think that's a great one. Go with your gut and bet on yourself. I mean, right? Yeah.
Confidence in yourself, because if you don't have confidence in yourself, nobody else is.
Yeah, and then who could you have confidence in if you can't have confidence in yourself? I mean, you got to look out for number one. Not look out for number one, but make sure that you know what you're capable of and all the good that you bring to the table, for sure.
Well,
yeah. So, all right. So this has been epic. I mean, like, I know that you were saying before we got on here, you're like, oh, I don't know what we're going to talk about. And I mean, we could we talk every day, but we could have done this episode for 3-4 hours, but we both have jobs. So we gotta go back to work. But I just want to thank you. We're not going to give links because if people want to reach out to you, they should be reaching out to me first anyway. So I will put my links, the morning spotlight. Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. I'll put my links, themorningspotlight.com and themorningspotlight@gmail.com are the email address and website for the show. Dad, I'm really excited that I was able to convince you to come on today. This was amazing. I mean, you may not know it, but you are a fantastic guest and a fantastic dad. And I was so happy that we were able to put this episode together and have you on today. So I really appreciate it. I love you. And I'm so glad that we were able to set this up.
I love you too. And I'm glad you thought I was a good guest. You had some pretty good guests on here. 80 guests before me. You've had some heavy hitters that listen to them, most of them. You've had some really good guests on here. So I'm just happy to be part of your show. And, thanks for inviting me.
Of course.
I'll see you on Father's Day.
Yeah, Yeah, right. We'll listen to this on the porch. We'll have a beer. We'll listen to this on the porch, and we'll have a great little Father's Day.
Is it? Are we limited to one beer, or can we?
We're probably going to do a couple more than just one. Good. Yeah.
All right,
All right, Doug. All right. Love you. Spotlighters, thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time.